hey, when you're done listening to this episode, if you're on iTunes, go on there and rate us 5 stars, because that's the cool thing to do that all the cool kids are doing.
Oh yeah, I've done it 10 times.
This is the Analysis in Chains with Nathan Williams and Neal Kieran.
Welcome to Analysis in Chains. I'm Nathan Williams. Neal, how's everything?
Life is good, Nathan. Life is good. That's it. That's all I can say. I'm alive. I'm still alive. I'm breathing. I can see.
It's better than the alternative.
It is. It is. I'm not sick, and I believe that since that flu, I was totally traumatized. Just taking it day by day and enjoying the fact I'm alive. That's it.
How's the weather out there?
Do you really want to know?
Because in Berlin, it's pretty much spring. Like, I'm looking out the window and going, I don't want to record right now. I want to go and romp in the beautiful fields of gold.
Well, I want to record and I want to stay in where there's central heating. I do not want to go outside. It's still freezing. There's lots of ice, lots of snow in Montreal. I love Montreal, but this time of year, I ask myself, why did I move to Canada? And there's I won't answer that question, Nathan, but
why do I live in where the air hurts my face?
But we've another 2 months to go until the sun is back, and hopefully maybe the crypto winter will be over by then as well. We'll see.
Well, let's see. Here's hoping. Maybe I better pick up a Bitcoin before the big rally. Weren't you predicting a big rally coming up soon? Not that our predictions have ever been really on point, but
do I really want to admit that? Do I really? Okay, I could always. Now's a good opportunity to come up with a new prediction. I would say at the moment, I said this last week, I feel that there's not much to get excited about when looking at, say, prices. For example, when I look at sent addresses or active addresses, so it's just some blockchain activity, there is not much happening. And I said last week that I think Ethereum is the better blockchain to look at because price seems to react better to, say, blockchain stats fundamentals. I did like read some research where someone wrote an article. I don't know if it was on CoinDesk, but they were saying that they did some regression analysis on the different statistics on the various blockchains, like sent addresses or average transaction volume, what have you, that helps determine price. Because we're all looking at these different statistics, trying to figure out, okay, what's a good future indicator of what's happening. And yeah, I'm set on active addresses, hash rate, difficulty, all of these type of things. So this article was saying average transaction volume, average transaction value is actually is highly correlated with price, and we should look at that metric. But I said to myself, that makes no sense. If you're moving, say, 100 Ethereum tokens 1 week at the value of $100, and now it's worth $110 another week, the price went up 10%, therefore the average transaction volume has also gone up 10%. It's not two separate things. Average transaction value cannot tell you why price went up. It's got nothing to do.
Well, it's correlation is not causation, right? Like,
yeah.
They're definitely correlated, but it does one drives the other.
Exactly. I read this. I think it was CoinDesk, and I was like, wow, there's still a lot of poor understanding of blockchain, and there's still no consensus yet as to what drives price up and down, etc., etc. So for me, I'm still not totally bullish yet. But you will always find articles that are trying to tell you, well, because the sun went up this way and because the wind is blowing east, therefore we're going to have a Bitcoin rally. So I would advise people, wherever you read out there that's telling you that Bitcoin and crypto is going to go up, maybe do some of your own research and take it with a grain of salt.
I guess one thing that this brings up that we've observed over the past couple of years, Neal, is that when you don't have an anchor for what a price should be, it'll go all over the place. The reason that crypto has been relatively stable, even this crypto winter that we've been living in, is really because people have sort of learned what to expect with crypto. Like they have some sort of metrics to say, well, maybe the price should be closer to this or closer to that, and they'll differ on metrics, but they're actually using metrics, and people are sort of following along with everybody else. You know, it's funny, like you expect, I guess, the market for any asset to automatically determine a price based on what it's worth, but no one ever knew what a Bitcoin was worth. No one ever knew what an Ether was worth. And we're still having that discussion today. It's interesting because without equal access to sort of like all knowledge, you can't really come up with a definitive answer, just sort of speculation. Maybe it's worth $100 based on the number of transactions, or the transaction value, or the hash rate, or how many people are going to build on top of it. But it's far from being quantifiable.
Well, for me, when I look at price, I look at it no different to how I would look at the price of gold or the price of oil or various other commodities. It's all about supply and demand. And if you are an oil producer and if you're producing a lot of supply, well, naturally that brings down price. And then the other side is, okay, how is demand? Is demand growing? Like, how is market penetration? Do more people need this? And at the moment with Bitcoin, I feel that there is not, or even most crypto, is that yes, there's some enthusiasm, yes, the users are growing, but they're not growing a lot. So sometimes I ask myself, okay, are these miners producing more coins than the actual growth of users or enthusiasts of crypto? And when I look at Ethereum, its hash rate is nearly the same as I think a year ago, just off the top of my head. But when I look at Bitcoin, it's starting to return back to the high that was at last October. And that doesn't make sense when price is being down 90%, but hash rate continues to increase. So that's why I really question price, and I say to myself, well, it does look like miners are oversupplying Bitcoin when adoption is not growing as fast. So that's why I feel that price, it's going to struggle to increase in the next few months.
What I think really separates crypto from other traditional assets like gold is, with gold you can predict both supply and demand. In a certain sense, you know, at least within certain bounds, how much is going to be expected for jewelry, how much is going to be expected for electronics, how much is going to be expected for investment, and there will be a bit of variance based on speculation, but the demand side is much more knowable. Same thing with oil, same thing with concentrated orange juice or any physical asset or future. With crypto, it's a little different because so much of it is based on speculation. Now, I guess with Ethereum, you can bring in the question of how many people are building on Ether, how many people are making their own project, and how much Ether will that take, and you can make models that would take a look at that. With Bitcoin, it's a little harder. There are projects that build on Bitcoin, but people have been using Bitcoin more as a store of value, and then the question is, well, how much can it store? And so the supply side is fairly predictable because of the hash rate. The demand side, not so much.
Yeah, I think you touched on a very valid point when you talked about the gold element, that we're able to predict demand in terms of jewelry and electronics. And I would feel that with Ethereum and other blockchains similar to it that have, say, ERC721 tokens or non-fungible tokens, there will be cycles, especially if you look at gaming. With gaming, you have streaming, you have these like stickers that people send to each other during streaming, you have items in games. So whenever a game is growing, you can say to yourself, actually, because this game is getting more popular, therefore, say, Ethereum or whatever blockchain is being used will grow in demand because of this new NFT product is getting more popular, or maybe because of the securitized token that's based on, say, Cardano, or it's based on Lisk or whatever. Because that's grown as a market, therefore you can predict demand for this token for transactions. So like this makes it easier for these types of crypto, and that's why I'm using Ethereum blockchain as an indicator for market enthusiasm. But then going back to your point on Bitcoin, you can't predict. It's become very hard to predict Bitcoin, and I feel that this is why you hear about these various projects that's trying to use the Bitcoin blockchain in other ways. It's like Veriblock that we talked about last week. It's trying to do proof of proof. So it's looking at another way of using Bitcoin blockchain, and if you can use it in different ways, then that can help you predict demand of Bitcoin for transactions and settlements and stuff like this. It's probably why we keep hearing about international settlements as a solution for Bitcoin, or as the problem that Bitcoin can be applied to, because that is actually easy to market. Its size is easy to determine. It's a market that people understand, and because you know how much is going to be going, across the border each year, then you can predict Bitcoin fluctuations. But beyond that, we're not hearing about these other markets that Bitcoin can be applied to the way we hear about Ethereum and other blockchains. So I feel like this is a big challenge for Bitcoin, but it's also probably why we hear about these other projects involving Bitcoin that can help them access other markets that Ethereum and other blockchains are a part of.
There's one other aspect that I was just thinking as you were talking here, Neal, that does make the demand side hard to predict, and that is the volatility. So the volatility is in a sense one of the drivers for why it's hard to predict, and I'll tell you why. Is because if you expect Bitcoin to be volatile, if you expect it to, especially if you expect it to go up, you're more likely to hold. And so if you're going to hodl a coin instead of using it as a traditional store of value, or instead of using it as a medium of exchange or settlement, which is what it's used for, or ostensibly, or instead of building on top of it and using it as like a ticket or a utility to access a network, you're going to instead treat it as a speculative investment that you want to hold on to until it grows in value. And so that very volatility, the reason that it is used as an incentive, becomes sort of the undoing of attempting to predict it, and makes it even more volatile. It's one of these sort of positive feedback loops.
Yeah, I think you actually made a very interesting point, because the thing about gold, and I bring up gold because people say that Bitcoin is digital gold, is that it has two main uses or functions today. One, be it in a physical sense, be it for jewelry or electronics, and the other one is for monetary policy. So at the moment, gold price is actually rising because various governments are buying gold to protect themselves because they're getting worried about US dollar risk. So it has that other function. But Bitcoin does not function like that today. You don't have big institutions buying it to protect themselves from anything. And at the moment, it is just a speculative asset. So it would have to get to this other level of, say, function in monetary policy for it to become something, I think, more powerful, or to what other people see it becoming in the future. And I know that's why people are pushing for an ETF and other things. But until that happens, like, it's gonna be very difficult to really see the proper value of Bitcoin. And that's why I think you're gonna need a world mental shift in monetary policy now in terms of what is value for Bitcoin to become this Maximus dream. And I guess it's why we often talk about Ethereum and other blockchains, because it's a lot more tangible, it's a lot more easier to understand where price is. Whereas, as you said about Bitcoin, it's like you buy and hold and hope that it goes up in value, and that seems to be the only function of it today.
To change gears a little bit, Neal, we were talking on our Telegram group. Join our Telegram group, by the way, all you listeners. We were talking on the Telegram group a couple of days ago. Was it a couple of days ago? About JP Morgan.
Yeah, I guess we'll just briefly touch on this. So the JP Morgan story that's been out is that they come up with their own coin, and it is to do with settlements in the financial industry. Now, there's various settlements out there, and I think international settlements is the most popular one that we often hear about. But the way finance works around the world is like a daisy chain. You have all of these systems interlinked to each other, and what they would like to do is to have one main central system that does a lot of the transactional settlements for various reasons. And this helps reduce rent seeking. In other words, there's less transactional costs when moving money. And but the big problem about this, you could argue, is that, well, actually, if any company wants to join or use the system, that means they have no incentive to come up with their own. In other words, since JP Morgan have already created this coin, well, Goldman Sachs won't create it. It's pointless, because the whole point of this coin is for the whole industry to use it. A bit like how everyone uses SWIFT for international transactions. It's like the main number one resource or financial company whenever doing international transactions. Well, JP Morgan wants to be the main settlement tool for various banks, and then therefore it makes no sense for, say, Goldman Sachs to come up with their own. But then that also really makes you question Ripple and XRP, and that's what a lot of people have been debating during the week. Does this mean Ripple and XRP is dead if JP Morgan have come up with their own equivalent? Personally, I think that this is an interesting development, and I think that JP Morgan coins will be a success, and I think that it does pose a big threat for Ripple and XRP. And I think that we could see a rise of private blockchains these days while we're in this crypto winter. But ultimately, the future of crypto, in my view, is public blockchains, which I think will rise again in the next few years. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
I don't know. There's a lot there. I don't know. My first thought when I saw JP Morgan bringing out their own cryptocurrency was that this has about as much chance of flying as the spruce goose. And the reason is not because they are small, it is because they are big. It is because if JP Morgan brings out something that they say this should be the standard for the industry, why would everyone else go with them? And maybe I don't know enough about the actual way they've set it up. Maybe it is a legitimately decentralized protocol that would be perfectly fine for everyone to use. But somehow I doubt that. Somehow I think that what they're coming out with at JP Morgan is probably going to be something on a private blockchain where JP Morgan has just a little bit more control than everyone else. And if that's the case, then no one's going to want to use it. It'll be the same thing like, I remember a few months ago reading about IBM and Maersk coming out with a logistics supply chain built on Hyperledger that no one else wanted to join because Maersk and IBM are two juggernauts and no one wants to be a second comer to someone else's blockchain. JP Morgan is not the first institution to try and bring out their own cryptocurrency. Maybe they're the most ambitious, but most of the others actually tried either joining Corda, which is, I think the project was called R3, or maybe I'm getting it backwards. R3 was the consortium and Corda was the product. But anyway, there was that. And then there was Ripple. And those were sort of like the startups that were in the space. And generally the thought process is it's easier and safer to partner with a startup as opposed to partnering with a giant juggernaut that wants to make piles and piles of money by dominating the global financial system. So, I mean, maybe, but I don't share your confidence. And the thing is, what this might do is it might bring us all back to sort of reality and say, okay, well, if we're going to recreate the financial system, we need a system where everyone can enter in on an equal foot. And maybe this idea of a decentralized consortium or a multi-stakeholder group or something where there's no one entity in control is going to end up winning the day. But I have real trouble imagining, Citi and Goldman and Wells Fargo and all of these international institutions, HSBC, all saying, yeah, let's just jump on board to one of our competitors' projects. Yeehaw!
I
don't know.
I do think they will all jump on board, because at the end of the day, if JP Morgan can prove huge cost benefits to these guys, and remember, all of these guys are interlinked. They all have lunch together. They all go to conferences together. I think it's easier for, say, JP Morgan to sign on Citibank, HSBC, Goldman Sachs than it is for Ripple to sign on these guys. And at the end of the day, it's just a settlement solution. It's not going to revolutionize, I think, finance. It's just a way of speeding up transactions for our clients, and also reducing costs for clients. I think that's it. But I do feel that the future of crypto is public, not private. And the only thing about this case that's important to me is, what does this mean for Ripple? And not a case of, okay, this is how the financial system is going to be for the future. So I'm very curious to see what will happen. I've seen people on Bloomberg say, yeah, Ripple are in trouble, and then the host would say, yeah, but Ripple hasn't fallen by 10%, 20%, the market's not reacting. And then the reply was, well, that's because crypto markets are inefficient. So I'm very curious to see, will this hypothesis, or how this hypothesis play out? Is it that the Ripple is really in trouble, or is it that the markets are inefficient? So we'll see. But I'm on the case that Ripple's in trouble.
Could be both. I mean, you do make a compelling argument, and even if JP Morgan has no chance of winning the day, you do have a point that it's not like Ripple necessarily is going to win the day either.
Yeah, I guess.
Anyway,
we'll see. And it's another prediction by Neal, and maybe we'll find out in 5 years.
We're not financial experts, so don't invest based on us. All right. Sounds good, Neal. You have a great weekend. And for everyone who's listening, if you enjoyed the conversation and you want to participate and you have an opinion on it, join us on Telegram, Analysis in Chains on Telegram. Until next time, keep on hashing. Thank you.